Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. Our guest today is Christine Skinner, Director of the British Council, Taipei. Ms. Skinner, we've been talking about how to promote cultural ties between different societies. From your own personal experience, you've been in this part of the world for quite some time. When you first come to Asia, do you, face any cultural barriers that you could not overcome?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, our cultures are really different. And the first time that I came to Asia, I went to Korea, to Seoul in Korea, and worked there in the Women's University, actually, for a couple of weeks. And it was very interesting. It was very interesting. I think I spent the whole of those 2 weeks with my mouth open, going, oh, look at this, oh, look at that. It's absolutely fascinating and exciting and very different. And I think that, thinking back, I can remember one of the things that really struck me was the fact that there were these huge TV screens in the city, which actually in Taipei we have quite a lot of. And to me it just felt very modernistic. It's many times when I've come into Asian cities, I felt as if I was moving into another era, as if I was moving into the space age. Sometimes you expect to see, those little space cars just go whizzing around and people will be flying around in the air. It's just so modern. Whereas our towns in the UK they're on a much smaller scale. Quite often I know Taiwanese people, when they go to the UK, they're a bit surprised that, oh, but it's all very old. And actually it is.
That's right.
We have preserved a lot of our old buildings, and you will find that, our towns are generally not high-rise. We don't have very many tall buildings. That's
right. And you had experience of working in China as well, and for some time. And what was your experience there, when you were working there? Sorry, when was that?
I was in China from 2002 to 2006.
Okay, before you came here.
Yeah, so just before I came here. And I actually accepted a job in China without ever having been to China. It was a bit like throwing a dice, that was the deal, and so I decided, okay, well, let's just go and see what it's like. And I'd always been fascinated by China because of the fact that I felt that Chinese culture was so different from my own culture, and it was something that I really wanted to explore. And we Westerners are very often quite fascinated by Chinese culture. We have got a very romantic idea of Chinese culture, that people are continuously doing Tai Chi and this sort of thing, and drinking tea, which I later discovered the tea part is true. But we did have I had a very romantic idea of what it was going to be like. And then I went to live in Guangzhou, which is a big, dirty, industrial city of probably about 16 million people. And it was totally overwhelming. I'd never been in a place that big in my life.
So how did you adjust yourself to this new and strange city in Guangzhou?
Well, it was really quite scary at first, getting used to such a big city. I come from Manchester, which is a city of about 1 million people, and I had to get used to living in a city of 16 million, Guangzhou. And it wasn't easy. Everywhere I went, it felt that there were always thousands of people, which I really wasn't used to. You can always find a quiet space, even in a city centre in the UK, and London has got parks right in the middle, so if the city gets a bit too much, you can escape. But that wasn't the case in Guangzhou.
But for yourself, how do you know the culture, in China, as a foreigner living in China?
I think by being there and by getting to know Chinese people. And I was very fortunate in that I had fantastic colleagues. All of my colleagues were Chinese. I was the only Westerner in the office. So all of my colleagues were Chinese, and they were just fantastic. And they gave me this crash course in learn Chinese culture. And then, of course, I was working with our contacts in government and arts organisations, much as I am now, of course. And what I discovered was all of the stereotypes that I had about Chinese people being very serious, I thought. No sense of humour. No, the Chinese have got no sense of humour, I always thought. And what I discovered was that all the people that I met were fantastic. They were very warm and very easy to be with. I felt really very authentic. That they valued genuine communication. That they wanted to meet me, and I really did appreciate that. And I have to say that I was very, very sorry to leave my contacts, the friends that I'd made in Guangzhou, my colleagues. I had a very good experience, and so I really wanted to continue living in a Chinese culture. Hence the decision to come to Taiwan.
And after you came to Taiwan, do you see any cultural differences between Taiwanese society and Chinese society, mainland Chinese society?
Well, when I first came to Taiwan from being in Guangzhou, I felt like I was back in the West, actually. But that was only a first impression, because I think that on the surface, Taiwan is very, very interesting, very different and very interesting, and has its own unique flavour. And Taiwan is Taiwan, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. But first impressions are that Taiwan is a very westernised place. All of these 7-Elevens and Starbucks and this sort of thing do give that impression. But then there is another Taiwan, which is the back streets, the night markets,
very traditional.
the temples and the very traditional side, which I found very fascinating. And of course the ease of access to the most fabulous countryside I've ever seen in my life just makes it a really wonderful place.
Which part of Taiwan have you ever been to?
Well, I've been down south and Taichung, which is great, over to Sun Moon Lake, which is really beautiful, Taroko Gorge. This is all on holiday. Hualien.
Beautiful places, you know. Do you find it difficult in making friends here in Taiwan, you know, as a foreigner?
No, not really. No, not really. You know, I like people in general, and you know, I'm always happy to meet people and to make friends. And I want to make friends here. You know, I am here because that is what I want to do. I want to know more about Taiwanese culture, and it's fascinating that I'm learning about the complexities of Taiwanese culture now. It's taken me a long time to actually get a sense of just how deep and how complex this culture is. So I'm really enjoying it.
Do you find language as a barrier for you to make friends or even to meet with people in Taiwan?
Chinese is difficult. It's a difficult language for Westerners to learn, and I am studying Chinese. I've been studying Chinese since I started living in mainland China. And I wish I was doing better at it, actually. It's a very difficult language for us to learn, but my aim is that by the time, well, hopefully before I leave Taiwan, I will be fluent in Mandarin. I really want to do that, because I think that language is certainly the best way. Learning a language is the best way to access that culture. It's not the only way, it has to be more than that. But language is very important.
There have been some debates or, you know, criticism in Taiwan now as to whether the language skills of our young kids in terms of speaking English is diminishing or is you know, losing its advantage. Do you think that that's the case now in Taiwan? I mean, the younger people are now less capable of speaking or using language, you know, English?
Well, I haven't really been here really long enough to be able to make any comparisons with, you know, how people's English was before. People do tend to speak American English here, you know, and I'm always a bit surprised to hear people speak with American accents. And that is the case with most Taiwanese, which is fine. You know, that's perfectly okay. And I find that people are generally pretty good at speaking and have very clear pronunciation and pretty good understanding. But when it comes to writing, not so great, really.
And why was that, do you think?
I think that people need to practice their writing more because it's just harder. You know, it is much more difficult, I think, to learn writing. And English is not an easy language to write.
But for some people, the best way for them to study English is to go to school or a cram school or even their radios and so on. But I think television and the radio stations are also one way to promote language skills in Taiwan. But most people, they cannot find BBC. They cannot have this kind of BBC radio, BBC TV in Taiwan. Do you think there's any way that we can promote this kind of service in Taiwan in the future?
I wish we could. I mean, I would love to have the BBC too in Taiwan. We've got a very tiny BBC office here, and I'll have a chat with them. You know, I don't know if the BBC will consider operating its services from here. But I certainly miss the BBC. I really value it. Of course, you can access BBC radio via the internet.
Yeah, that's right.
And I do that because one of the things that I miss about the UK is the quality of BBC Radio 4.
That's right.
Definitely listen to Radio 4.
That's right.
For good radio, talk radio.
I think the ICRT also provide 30 minutes of a BBC service every day, I guess.
Yeah, they do. ICRT do quite a lot. They have a few links with the BBC, so every day you'll be able to get a little bit of a link through ICRT to BBC News. And then on Sunday, I was listening to Top of the Pops on ICRT, which was pretty good, and that was from the BBC too.
Are you also working with any local schools, local companies, or local radio stations in terms of promoting the British culture here in Taiwan?
We've done a little bit of work with local radio stations. We work with universities, of course, so we get out there and do presentations in Taipei and in Kaohsiung, but we do a lot of that in Kaohsiung. Esleet has been fantastic with us actually in Kaohsiung, and they have allowed us to do lots of presentations for students in their stores, which have gone down very well. We've been doing that now with them for a few years. Yeah.
You're also doing these kind of language tests, right? Here in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Do you think that in terms of students taking a test, there's an increasing number of students in Taiwan taking a test?
Yeah, a lot more. A lot more. Yeah, we've seen a huge increase. The IELTS test now is accepted by US universities, so that means that a lot of students who are planning to go to the US to study can take IELTS. And I think that IELTS is generally reckoned to be more secure and more reliable. But many
students here go to cram school to prepare for the IELTS test and so on. Do you think that's the right way to prepare for a test?
Oh, it's a pity really that people do go to cram schools, because I always think that language learning ought to be fun and should be enjoyable.
That's right.
And that is the way to learn it. I think that, the earlier that kids start learning English, and the earlier they feel confident in using English, then the more they are going to avoid the pain of having to go to a cram school to just learn for an exam. It's really no fun just learning for an exam. But if that's what people have to do, then that's what they have to do, really.
Yeah. In terms of building up the cultural ties more effectively, do you have any suggestions for doing that?
Between the
different cultures and
between Taiwan and the UK?
And UK, yeah.
I think we do pretty well, really. I would certainly like to see a lot more UK artists coming over to Taiwan. I'd like to see some big performances and high-profile people coming out. That's not really possible with the British Council. We're only a small NGO in Taiwan. But I think that some of the private companies working in the arts in Taiwan should consider British performers and British artists, because we have very creative people who are doing things that are slightly outside of what is commercial. Commercial stuff is easy to get. You can go to Warner's cinemas and you can see the latest commercial stuff.
That's right.
But I think that what we've got in the UK is a very strong alternative, cutting-edge scene where people are able to be a lot more experimental, and it's great to actually see that in Taiwan, because Taiwan is one of the few places, I think, around the world with an alternative art scene to match the UK's.
I see.
Yeah.
When we come back, we'll put the cultural ties issue in a broader perspective, that is the so-called diplomacy. Because in some cases, people in Taiwan think that culture exchange is cultural diplomacy, meaning culture is a means to the diplomatic goals and so on. But that's a very narrow sense of the cultural ties.
Oh, yeah.
But when we come back, we'll talk about that,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about also your perspective of Taiwan's promotion of our own culture. And stay with us. We'll be back in a few moments.